A very good morning to everyone. Welcome to the pre-event workshop day of the Computer Science Postgraduate Colloquium 2021. My name is Kang Teng, and I'm a PhD student from School of Computer Science, USM. I'll be serving you as your moderator today. There will be 3 workshops today. The first workshop will start momentarily at 8:45 a.m. by Dr. Muhammad Akmal nor Khalid, titled Gaming the System Using the Game Concept to Conduct Your Research. We will have a short break after that, followed by second workshop titled How to Write a Research Paper for Referee Journal by Dr. Laif Abualiga at 11 a.m. At 1 p.m., let's enjoy our lunch, and we will come back online at 2:30 p.m. for our last workshop of the day by Dr. Tokir Ahmad Rana on how to conduct literature review and organization of the literature. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping notes. Please attend the workshop at a quiet place at home with limited distractions or noises so that you can focus on the session. Please make sure your microphone and camera are turned off during the session. If you have any questions for the speaker, please submit your question via the chat feature available for this session for the speaker to answer. The committee will release the CSPC workshop feedback form at 4:30 p.m. later. Please remember to submit the form after attending all 3 workshops today to receive your certification of attendance. For more information about CSPC 2021, you may proceed to the official website to download the program book. Finally, kindly be informed that today's session is being recorded for future reference. Thank you for your cooperation, and I hope you enjoy this workshop today. Now, I would like to invite our first speaker for the workshop today, Mr. Muhammad nor Akmal Khalid. Dr. Muhammad nor Akmal Khalid is the Assistant Professor in the School of Information Science at the Japan Advanced Institute of Science and Technology and a part-time research fellow in the School of Computer Science, USM. He obtained his bachelor, master, and PhD degrees from the USM. He specializes in artificial intelligence techniques such as evolutionary algorithm and decision support system, and game studies such as entertainment science and games informatics. His work focuses specifically on methods and developments in the fields of entertainment technology and operational research. His topics of interest include, but are not limited to, manufacturing systems, advanced scheduling and planning, artificial intelligence techniques, game analytics and informatics, search algorithms, bio-inspired optimization techniques, and machine learning methods. Without further ado, let us welcome Dr. Akmal, who will be speaking to us on gaming the system using game concept to conduct your research. Over to you, Dr. Akmal.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? The moderator,
Yes.
can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Is it
Yes.
okay, or is it too slow or something?
It's good.
Okay. Can you see the screen now?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much for the welcoming notes just now, and of course the introductory info on me as well. I'm glad to join today, and of course, I always glad to join CSPC conducted by CSUSM every year. Anyway, today my topic of this workshop is more or less about gaming the system using game concept to conduct your research. So basically, I'll try to cover this as short as possible, or maybe not short as possible, maybe as comprehensive as possible. Uh, because what I'm saying from this title, maybe some of you are quite confused already what the title is all about, right? Anyway, what I mean here is that instead of going through a very boring or a very complicated process of research, maybe we can actually make it fun a little bit, or maybe find a shortcut or some ways to actually help you to do your research, not just being frustrated and so on, but also fun doing it as well. And of course, these are the outline for this presentation, more or less. Basically, I will cover a little bit because of with recent pandemic issue, right? And we feel that research are quite difficult and challenging to actually be conducted during this time. Not only research, but learning in general. And what are the core game concept that we can use for this particular setting, and how actually we can map this as a metaphor in research. So before I start, this is the quote by Arnold Joseph Toynbee. Very interesting quote, which me and my professor here always use it to conduct our research here. And we believe that by having blurring the line between work and play, we can actually have a very good accomplishment in any work that we do. So before I go any further, I would like to convey my greetings from JAIST faculty, and especially my senior colleague, Professor Ida. He sent his greeting to everyone here. Hopefully, maybe uh, next time he can be one of the candidate for giving talk later on. Anyway, so as you all may know, currently pandemic been happening all around the world, but it's not actually the first one that happened. And I would like to, recap that and actually see from the good and the bad side and the good side of that particular pandemic situation. And of course, it can be related to innovation in a way. So I'm not sure everyone know about this. These are the picture of a Great Plague in London in 1665, and this actually related to the bubonic Great Plague of England, which happened, I think, 1665 to 1666. Is one of the Great Plague happened in England and actually killed a lot of people suddenly. And why they call it bubonic, because of there are some mass that come out from the victim's skin and so on and become kind of like a liquid, very dirty and so on, and people will not notice it uh, very well. These are from the infection of a bacterium and usually transmitted. Basically, this plague come from a rat and it hop into a fleas, and fleas actually transfer this from rat to human. And because of this, roughly 50% of London population died, which is around 100,000 people in around 1.5 years. And many criticized during this time that the government or any community handling this situation not very good because of many religious belief, and of course health system are not being established yet at the time. And of course the 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 main problem is not because of the infection, but because of the hygienic situation of the whole situation. And actually, when they try to kill the rat, but instead of uh, uh, trying to kill the rat, maybe they should contain it, or maybe send it to other places. I'm not sure, but there are many controversy regarding this issue. And the good side of it is that I'm not sure whether anyone know him. So I think I already know him because of the title just now. This is Sir Isaac Newton. So he's actually called this year Annus Mirabilis, which is years of wonders. And during this pandemic time, Cambridge was closed because of the plague, and because of that, he has free time and free from university responsibility. And because of that, he developed one of the influential work in physics and mathematics, which is development of calculus, optics, and law of motion and gravity. And this is actually very important in the science development. And because of, people are given the time and of course given the freedom to actually do this during pandemic time, they are being they able to do this and able to develop new theory and so on. And we can say that all pandemic some pandemic actually have their own benefit, and some maybe making the situation worse. And uh, it depends actually. And uh, actually during this plague, there are some article mentioned about Sir Isaac Newton drawing in the wall and so on, have been held in his house for few months because of this. And because of that, he actually developed this kind of theory because he has the time to actually think about it. And I think this is a good example of what we can do as a researcher now, because have more time to spend in our home, and our we are not being held down by too many responsibility by being physically there. So because of that, we actually able to do better research. And then another example is during a smallpox. Mm, This actually happened in 1705 to 1722. So this outbreak happened from a virus and transmitted directly from a respiratory droplet from infected people. So basically, hello there. Yeah. Anyway, these are more or less similar to a coughing situation of the virus, similar to what COVID is currently done. But the difference is that maybe this happened because of, I think, hygienic situation maybe. And this happened, become an outbreak because of number of cases spike uh, in a very specific location. And because of this situation, some people, or actually a doctor, cotton metal on the left side, and the right side is actually Dr. Boyston, that conducted smallpox inoculation. So this actually lead to, because of this outbreak, it leads to the development of inoculation and medical journalism. Before this, there are no inoculation or even vaccination. Even people heard about it, some history about being, used in China or used uh, uh, in uh, in other Southeast country, I think. And because of that, they kind of bring back this particular information to the Western countries, and they implore using this inoculation method. If more if you For your information, inoculation is actually a very different method compared to vaccination. Inoculation is when you use the raw material uh, from the disease itself, like when they have this smallpox, right? They just uh break that smallpox a little bit and then just transfer it to another people by having a small incision on the on the new patient skin. And because of that, people believe that, oh, this is not a very good idea, why you do this. And actually very a bad example to be applied because of during this time many people are superstitious and are very religious wise, meaning that they believe that, oh, by doing this they will put demon into their body and so on and something like that. And because of that, uh, uh, cotton metal actually and Dr. Boston worked together to actually reduce the mortality rate from 14% to 2%. And of course, you still have mortality rate, but actually it's better compared to, too many people dying. It's a few people only. And from there, actually, they try to convince the public by using experimental and control group to demonstrate the effectiveness of the inoculation method. And this actually is one of the first clinical trial reported uh, to public. And later, this method will be developed as a vaccination method by Jenner in 1800 as a guideline. And the motivation of the first inoculation campaign and media press are used to inform or alarm health crisis to general public, meaning that before this, newspaper and so on will just deliver news about daily life and other public newses, but not on medical part or any health crisis or maybe something that are alarming or potentially inducing panic to the population. These are the first campaign that being done, and actually this leads to medical journalism, meaning that instead of just mention very rough or uh, on the surface information, they give a very deep or detailed information of the analysis. You can see it from the source I attach here. Basically, they actually give all the chart and also statistic what they use to convince public about the mortality rate and how the effectiveness of the inoculation. So these are one more or less of innovation that have been done or arises from the pandemic. And the most before we come to the COVID, actually, the last one is actually the very similar to the COVID one, which is great influenza epidemic in 1980s after the First World War. These are also known as the Spanish flu, which caused by the strain of A H1N1. So the difference between this epidemic and COVID-19 pandemic is actually the mortality rate is higher for young adults. So basically, healthy people are much more exposed compared to older people. So the cause of this epidemic is actually from malnutrition, poor hygiene, because of many war camps, and also some of the adults, healthy adults, going to war. They have to stay at one place for months and months and using the same toiletries, and even no toilets and so on because of working on the front line of the war, right? So they don't really have the proper hygiene care, and because of that, the estimate from the Spanish flu actually around 500 million cases with 50 to 100 million reported death. So these are one of the worst influenza that happened in the history of the world. And from there, actually, Red Cross has give recommendation of using gauze mask, which is very similar to the mask we use for the COVID, right? But these are cloth mask, I think, a much older one when using 2 layer. And because of during this time, many people are going to war, right? Especially the men. The woman usually is the one that being responsible for medical uh, tasks and services. So based on this epidemic, a public health system are being proposed as a viable solution to address this increasing epidemic problem. Because when this influenza happen, health authorities doesn't know how to deal with them, because it's the first time something like this happen at a very large scale, and they are not prepared to respond it, and because of that they have quite delayed response. And the idea of public health system was still in infancy, meaning that only the middle class or the rich could afford to visit doctor. So the very large social divide happened during this time, and only the wealthy people are able to actually afford, because they have a system like family doctors and so on, right? At this time, you don't have a public clinic and public hospital yet, and because of that, it's being proposed as a public health system to actually address this and help, and meaning that much more socialized medicine, healthcare for all, meaning that the government should provide this and actually give this to all the people around the country, proper healthcare system. And of course, at this time as well, the development of insurance system, health insurance system, and so on are being developed as well. And because of this, we can see that the pandemic actually strive to actually, or maybe push us to have some kind of innovation. And this we can actually see similarly in recent one. So as of today, 219 million COVID-19 cases are reported worldwide, and about 4.55 million death toll. And we can see the impact COVID-19, because of the COVID-19, there being higher and higher increase of digital divide, meaning that some people are not be able to access certain things, and these are become much more apparent, because last time uh, we don't really know, we don't really care, or maybe more or less are not exposed to, aware or not aware of what happened around us, especially to the poor and the middle class. Now we can see the very increased digital divide, and when everyone want to use the internet, then we can see how much people are not being able to access it. And then of course, because of everyone is using the internet, there being escalation of online fraud and cyber crimes, and these are particularly important because before this, awareness about this fraud and cyber crime are less apparent. Now it become very clear to everyone that this are actually a very serious situation and need to be addressed. And some or most of you will be, recognize this, especially being overloaded with works and fatigue, because of, you are sleeping and you continue to work, and sleeping and continue to work all the time, and because of you are unable to go outside, and maybe being stuck in your house, and that not able to take a fresh air and so on. Yeah, this happen as well. But the good thing is we can see the resulting innovation in terms of research wise, right? Open peer review are starting becoming a commonplace. So because of that, when we want to publish, open access publication become very widespread, and the review process also become less took less time, because of people have more time on their hand, and the reviewer itself are being are being addressed, or how to say, employ to actually reduce their reviewing process. So sometimes it can take only weeks and even hours when it's considering open peer review. And online education are becoming commonplace, and they're being reinforced or enforced everywhere, especially in middle school or higher education, or higher learning education, because of we are unable to physically be there, and the education are being transitioned into an online state or online status, and this actually you know open up new possibilities to actually makes the class much more interactive online instead of being offline. And of course, we can see many advancement of AI-enabled technologies, especially like in terms of services. There are many services that are being deployed using AI and artificial intelligence to actually make the technology much more accepted, trusted, and even open. And this actually uh, quite interesting because I believe that when we have good innovation, actually we can actually address or maybe look the pandemic not only from their bad side but also from their good side as well. So that's about it for the first part. So I will come to the core concept of games, and before I do that, maybe some of you are not very familiar with game concept and some maybe are very well versed, so please bear with me if you do. And of course, these are just a general overview of available core game concept that can be or may be useful to actually being applied to research concept. So the first core concept is actually involving the form of play. So form of play maybe involve the human experience and the rules, which is able to organize the system into a structure and a culture that actually involve in making certain system within context and inhibition of certain situation. So these are actually a revolving concept, the first revolving concept or maybe core concept for game. And this is quite important because when we considering play, we thought that play is something that a rule that are being made up, but sometimes rule are made for a reason, and that reason actually helps to actually you know structure the system and give context. And because of giving this context, it kind of make uh, the game having certain culture towards it. For example, when you play a game, right, when you're starting one game, you're actually not very familiar with it, and because of that, you are learning the rules. And because when you understand the rule, you're starting to see how actually these are being useful in making the experience better. And because of that experience, you share it with your friend and so on, right? And when you share with certain other people, it will create kind of like a fan base, we call it. And because of that, it will create kind of culture, right? Okay, don't play at this time, and maybe this time we can play together and not try not to overpower certain people, because he or she just starting the game and so on, right? So these are kind of a culture that I was talking about, meaning that you are not just playing the game, playing like a robot, and you have kind of the rule of the game. But this is another rule that actually, not rule, maybe inhibition that related to the system that we are more or less call it kind of like a culture. So the next related concept is actually design and quality. So these are being proposed by Thompson. So it describes game having a specific merits. Example, in terms of design itself, the game should have some kind of depth, and the game should have some kind of clarity, meaning that in this context, depth is actually supporting multiple level or expertise. So if we design a game, if that game actually is not only being played by children but are not able to be challenging enough to the adults, so it lacks depth. And then clarity is meaning that you can judge certain action to be the best one at any given moment. So if let's say you cannot judge certain situation, then that game maybe lack clarity. So it's not a very good game design. And then of course another is the quality of the game, meaning that the game should have some kind of drama, meaning a certain suspense or possibility of recovering from losing or winning situation. And decisiveness, meaning that ultimately you can actually win the game, not just swinging who's going to win, and suddenly because of too many drama they are not able to win the game and just continue endlessly. So that also not a very good game, because you can make the game last longer, but uh game that lasts too long actually is not a good game as well, because your when you build up the information or build up the expertise, right, because of the depth, then the game is starting to become boring, and because of that, uh, unable to be decisive makes the game ultimately not good. Yeah, I'm not sure whether you are familiar with Flappy Bird, right? So Flappy Bird is actually similar in this context, meaning the game have a good clarity but lack of depth, and the game also have a good drama but lack decisiveness, meaning that you can play endlessly but it doesn't ultimately make you win anything. And of course you can judge it, but uh, ultimately you're just playing to go through certain bars. You don't have anything else to offer, or maybe making the process much more interesting. So it lacks depth and decisiveness. So it's not a very good game design or quality in this based on this core concept. Another core concept is actually a systemic approach. So this systemic approach usually maybe recently being used in game design, meaning that they try to make the system or the approach or the gate or the design to be conditioned towards a human culture, so that it can cultivate various activities in the game. So for example, a game is defined by a system, and the player will be engaged to it by via an artificial conflict. And these conflicts are being confined by a predefined rules, and this rule will help the player to actually uh, maneuver the conflict so that it will lead to an outcome that they want. So this is another design in games that are recently being applied, and of course these are also very interesting uh, say core concept, so that uh, the 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 how to say uh, the artifact, the game itself become very clear, meaning that you have a player, you have a rules, you have a predefined conflict and artificial conflict, and you know the outcome, and because of that you can actually adopt this and use like search based algorithms to actually generate new games for you. And these are actually happened by uh, professor uh, from Ireland, or they actually done this to in his PhD work, I think, in 2010, that makes a game, multiple games, by using evolutionary algorithms. And this evolutionary algorithm can, evolve one state of the game into a new game, and that new game actually being used for his commercialization, meaning that he sell new games based on his own uh, evolving system. So it's quite interesting in a way. And then I come to uh, one of the core concept that me and Professor Ida actually done it here in JAIST. And we use how to say the understanding of physics, meaning that we use the measure of uh, velocity, force, and so on to actually measure the information in the game, so that we use the notion of uncertainty as how fast we solve the uncertainty as the velocity. So by using that, we can actually calculate the gravity in mind. We call it as gravity in mind, and how actually this relate to culture and games. And we apply this to study about how game evolved in the first place, meaning that from Go, that 9 by 9 that have been created 1,000 years ago until the current one, how actually they evolve. And this actually been shown that the natural gravity in mind actually reduced. So more or less, this happened because of at that time, this are actually 20 or 10 uh, before BC, I think. So it's around 2,000 years to 1,000 years ago. And at that time, the world is actually more or less approaching agriculture eras, and because of that, people are much more, you know, how to say, much more mm, expected to receive, uh, how to say, a much more less competitive compared to current one, I think, and because of that, people are, how to say, modest in a way. And moving from there, actually, we can see connecting from to the second phase, which is the development of the chess itself. So before the modern chess come, there are older version of chess, which is called Chaturanga, which is uh, uh, originated few hundred years ago, before Go, after the Go development. And this actually show a different scenario. So this happened after the start of the centuries. So this show that the gravity actually increasing instead of decreasing last time. And based on that, we understand that industrialization era actually happened at this time as well. So people are much more competitive, and because of that, they are much more how to say, expected their game to be the same as well. And even during this time, there are many world war as well, right? So because of that, war game like this are much more preferred thing. But of course, these are from the perspective of the European country maybe, and some Asian country like China and Korean. But in our country maybe it's quite different. But of course, I thought that maybe last time in Malaysia as well we have this kind of game that evolved or a long time, but I failed to find some information on that. Anyway, if anyone know, maybe they can share with me later. Anyway, so why this is relevant, I think, because when we understand certain situation or information based on that game or info or the way that we play, we can better understand how we can actually make the process better. And because of that, that's why we are motivated to do this kind of research. So what I done with Professor Ida here actually is quite interesting, because we actually explore this, and we don't really, how to say, we don't really plan to come to this stage. We just I think at the start of my research here in JAIST, I'm more well versed on operational research compared to games research. And most game research at this time are much more performance based, meaning that they use AI to actually trying to solve the game, meaning that when you start your certain move, right, you can predict the future hundred or thousand of move later. And because of that, it's quite useful in many other domains or application. But uh, the problem is that this particular situation makes the game become very boring or very dead in a way, because not many people play chess anymore, and some maybe doesn't even know how to play chess anymore. And it's quite a shame because many AI applications are being developed from, you know, from the development of AI to play in chess. Even recently, there are Alpha Zero and Alpha Star and so on. Uh, uh, these are actually AI that have been developed to, play not only chess but Go bot, and also uh, Japanese game shogi, I think they call it. And all they this AI are going to able to play the game without any knowledge or any help from the human side. And this is actually a very big development in terms of AI development, because typically AI are very stupid, and many very required very specific, you know, assistance from human. But this time actually they can play this game much more better compared to human, and this tell us that maybe there are some processes that we overlook, and maybe uh, it can actually beneficial to us if we uh, see this from our own cultural and behavior perspective. So enough rambling. Maybe I will come to how actually we can use this game concept to actually help in terms of research. Oh, sorry, someone asking for annotation. Oh, anyway, let me continue. I'm sorry about that. So before I start on that, I would like to share some interesting take on research journey. Example, this part, the left side, or this one that I'm showing right now, is actually an example of OpenAI company that developed. So they done some research on using deep learning, I think, that apply using transformer, which is what we call as language model. Uh, they use this kind of language model to actually translate or contextualize a natural language into automated code generation. So meaning that you don't have to write the code yourself. The AI algorithm will write the code for you. So yeah, based on your command. So these are example a GIF picture that I made myself to show you, just to show you. You can visit the link if you want to see it yourself. It's quite interesting here actually, because some research journey, when they are well planned, I think, of course they are well funded as well, so they can lead to interesting innovation. And these are something that I think about 5 years ago. Is there any algorithm that actually can help, in terms of generating code for you? And after 5 years later, someone did it. So it's quite interesting. Yeah. So I think maybe this is a very well planned research in a way, because before they come to this codex system, uh, like I said just now, they develop an alpha zero or uh, alpha star algorithm, meaning that this algorithm actually learn something without the support or help from human, and this actually being adopted for this codex development. And of course, understanding language model also quite difficult, and they actually apply this to I think in Uber system, I think, I forgot already, being used by so to use to support services in some way in some very popular apps. I forgot the name of the app, and because of that, they have enough data to actually improve it, and they develop a new version of it. And because of that, they try to explore different environment, because the one that actually generate a code automatically, the original idea actually is using an evolutionary algorithm, meaning that they give a certain point of code or certain part of code, and then it will evolve to generate a new or better codes. But instead of taking that route, or maybe they're still doing that route, but we can see that here actually they develop the first commercial one, maybe commercial one, I'm not sure, because this is a very let's say barebone. Maybe there are any other application later on. But basically, the idea are being combined in a well-planned manner, and that's quite interesting in a way. And then another one is another research by a professor in Japan. Uh, one of the friend from uh, from Professor Ida, I think. They not directly from Japan. They are staying in US, but they're from Japan. And actually, one of the known colleague of Professor Ida, they developed an artificial agent. And the story is interesting because they don't know how to actually make the signal become smoother, because many artificial agents that are being simulated usually will have this kind of problem, meaning that they are unable to adapt to unfamiliar environment. And these are just simple example, meaning that when you're walking on a very smooth surface and suddenly you have slippery situation, like AI agent unable to adapt to this kind of situation. And I think because of the notice of this spike, I think uh, because of there are kind of blackout happen in their faculty, I think. Uh, of course, the system are running the simulation, but they're running on the backup generator, I think. Because of that, there are some spike in term of electrical charges. I'm not sure the what happened exactly, but the short note is that there are some spike in term of electrical signal, and because of that, they have the agent at the right time to actually adapt to this unfamiliar environment. And because of that, they try to explore this further by using stochastic spiking neural network to actually control the actuator of the robot. And it actually not the robot, the artificial agent, and this actually works by applying some noise or spike in the uh, network, so that the uh, the artificial agent can control by having this noise or spike in when they are facing unfamiliar environment. It's quite interesting in a way, because it's very unexpected but very novel in a way. So sometimes a random thought or maybe well planned can actually help you. So the take from this example is that uh, not all well planned works, and sometimes random thought also works. Yeah, so you have to consider all options. So before we actually gaming the research process, we need to understand what are the building blocks of scientific research. So the first part of this is actually observation. So observation, what means by observation here is the perception of reality, meaning that what are the activity that we use to acquire knowledge through our senses or instrument. Usually observation uh, can be uh, can be divided into two, which is quantitative and qualitative. So I think most of you understand what qualitative and quantitative research means here, and this actually are considered part of the observation component. And another basic component is the facts. So fact is actually the verified information, whether it's a past or present information that provide information for the objective reality, meaning that the concept are provable. So meaning that you already have some research or some result pointing to that information or pointing to that event and actually explaining certain objective reality of that particular event. And then another concept or component is actually construct, which is attributes or idea, which is not directly measured without using indicator or concept. So these are something that we're trying to explore further and actually or construct that involved in many scientific research that we're trying to identify. And then when we try to define all of this, we have two type of definition, which is conceptual and operational. So conceptual means that what are the characteristic or meaning that associated with particular definition. So what does it mean? But operational actually involve definition that the researcher used to measure the construct. So how actually to measure it? So for example, let's say we have this kind of statement: "Its intelligence leads to happiness." So the intelligence can be conceptually defined as the capacity for abstract thought, understanding, communication, reasoning. So the abstract thought here or capacity for abstract thought is the construct. And we have certain facts that actually support that intelligence have the capacity for abstract thought, understanding, communication, reasoning, and so on. Of course, there are many construct and there are many observations in this conceptual definition. And then the operational part is actually when we try to measure the intelligence, maybe we can use a certain score to actually uh, or maybe certain test to actually score the result to actually know whether it's related to intelligence or not. So these are just a rough example. Maybe certain study or maybe other people study research, maybe study in social science and other uh, nature nature science. Maybe they have better understanding in this context. But these are the basic building block of scientific research. And I think many or even me during my PhD last time or maybe master last time, I've been given very little exposure to this, and this is actually helpful when you actually know about it. And then the second part is communication. How actually you communicate your result, or maybe communicate your finding or your study and so on. And there can be three types of communication, which is variables, hypothesis, and argument. So variables can be any characteristic that varies. For example, when you try to measure a construct, right? So you have a certain value, for example, between 1 to 100 or 0 to 1, then this actually can be considered as variable. The hypothesis is a statement that empirically testable. So usually when you want to, communicate something, maybe you have your own hypothesis and you try to test it by having some data to support it. So yeah, it's a hypothesis. And of course, how you reason with it, which is trying to convey the meaning, try to explain, interpret, or challenge, defend, or explore. So these are what we call argument. And each of these can be divided into subpart, which is variable have independent, dependent, constant, and control. Uh, Basically, independent variable is the one that actually being tested, that you need to see whether it will influence the dependent variable. And the constant is really something that doesn't change. And control is something that you don't apply anything to it, and you want to see whether uh, what you're applying or what you're proposing actually give any difference or negative difference or positive difference and so on compared to the control group or control variable. So yeah, more or less. And then hypothesis. You have hypothesis can be very specific. For example, you apply to a very specific specific country, specific region, uh specific content, specific materials, and so on. So it can be very specific and a very general one. For example, like just now, is intelligent leads to happiness, for example. So that actually is a general hypothesis. But a universal one is the one that being accepted worldwide and become a very well-known theory. For example, a hypothesis given by Einstein, for example, so that they believe force the force that applied to a certain object on the Earth is by the gravity, force gravity. How to say, something like the gravity applied to an object that makes certain object fall to the ground, you know. So these are being universally accepted theory. But of course, when we have new finding, we will have a new hypothesis. So that's why we call this universal hypothesis. It's not actually a definite hypothesis. Uh, a definite one maybe what we call axiom maybe. So I don't want to go deep on that because there are many controversy on that. So anyway, and last one is argument. So you can be inductive and deductive. I will demonstrate this. So for example, why sale did not increase, for example. So these are actually very general hypotheses, and maybe you can specify by putting the time or putting the place, putting the context, and so on. So just bear with me about this. So, for example, you believe that uh, not believe based on the current one that you do some kind of promotion, but there are no sale increase. So what happened? So the hypothesis is that you believe that promotion campaign is poorly executed. So these are what we call inductive argument, meaning that um, based on what you observe, what you induce from it, what are the hypotheses that you can induce from it. So in this context as well, the dependent variable is the sale, the independent variable is promotion. So you try to see whether if you change the promotion, will it affect the sale, something like that. And then uh, when you do a deductive argument, you can say that maybe you have some kind of hypothesis whether the promotion campaign is fully executed. So this promotion is ineffective. That's why there are no sale increase. So it's a kind of deduction. So induction and deduction can work side by side as well. So in a way, these are kind of like tools that you can actually explore or maybe use for your research. And again, if we do reduction, we can say that effective promotion can actually helps to increase the sale. So of course, this leads to actual experimentation. And then when we try to game this rule, culture, or system of building block of scientific research, I recap again. We have observation, facts and construct, and then definition, and the experiment itself, focusing on the variable, hypothesis, and argument. And what are the findings that you can find from this particular experiment? So if we outline this into a very general or generic research, how to say, research structure, or maybe doesn't matter, research structure or writing structure and so on. So you have the background, meaning, for example, sale is crucial in business survival, for example. So we have this observation. This observation may be qualitative in nature. You can also give quantitative observation, for example, sale give 80% profit to the business, for example. Sale composed of how many percent for the business. Yeah, that's quantitative example. And then example, what are the gap or the previous work, or what are the facts and construct. So sales depend on promotion, staff, and product. So we know this as a fact. But of course, the construct here is that which of these are actually, affecting the sale. Yeah. So that's why some fact may become part of construct as well. So yeah, you need to understand it. And then when we come to research aim and objective, you need to define this conceptually and operationally. So conceptually, we want to understand how the sale is generally being perceived, and how can we actually improve it or measure it. So these are both conceptual and operational definition. And research methodology is to find the effective promotion campaign. So let's say maybe you're proposing, your research is proposing to have a better promotion campaign. So maybe there's some variable involved, some hypothesis involved, and some argument that you're conducting. And when you have this finding, you actually need to reflect back to your research aim, your previous work, and your background as well. Not just having your finding and then that's it. So I think I understand some people will tend to do that because the stress and the pressure that have been put to them are quite significant or great. And these are actually method that I think very interesting and very highlighted by my ex-supervisor last time, meaning that you have to see the connection, meaning that you have to map back to your research aim and objective, and how actually this aim and objective support your research methodology, and how this actually answer back to your previous work and the gaps that you found from your literature, and how this answer actually being impactful or influence the background itself, meaning how actually you're putting the dent to the knowledge. So yeah. And then these are one example using what what my own research had done. So let's say you have this kind of graph. You have certain progress, percentage of progress, right? And then the blue line is the linear progress, and red line is gamified, and the dotted line is challenge plus gamified. So a general activity will have the process of a constant v, constant velocity, meaning that the blue line it has changes of displacement, so it come from 0% to 100%, but the process are very linear. So these are referring to most activities that we do in our research journey, meaning that we have to have some kind of persevering effort. And then of course we have a gamified experience, meaning some activity on the journey need to be prioritized or marinate. For example, some processes, example like publishing paper and so on. I will give you example after this. And then the last one is dynamic challenge or gamified experience, which interplay between having certain gamified experience and general activity, meaning that maybe sometimes you will feel surprised or frustrated, but it's actually add variety to the journey. So when we try to map this into a very research process, right? So let's say you see this chart just now. I don't know, time maybe weeks or months or years, it doesn't matter. So the progress is actually, the important part is that we have to understand that when we try to reach our objective, it's a very constant process, but the journey could change along the way. And how we make that journey interesting is actually important. So some activity, like most activity, maybe require a persevering effort, right? So this actually can be, for example, like reviewing works or literature review, keeping up to date to any new development in your field, and even writing your dissertation. It can be a very persevering process, meaning you from start to end you always update your thesis, for example. But the activity on the journey may also be prioritized or marinate. For example, like publishing certain article or conference paper or posters, maybe sharing work in progress, and maybe reporting, reporting to your supervisor or reporting to your scholarship uh, body and so on. So some of this maybe you need to prioritize, some maybe you can marinate first because you're trying to find new ideas and new findings. But more or less, sometimes you will face rerun of experiments, flaw in design, and even unexpected finding, maybe negative finding or positive finding, doesn't matter, but it's unexpected. So this also happen along the process. But the important part is that don't let a bad day distract from the progress that you make. As long as you're reaching your progress little by little, doesn't matter it's a bad day in this day, but the overall process actually is really reaching to a better state of your study or journey. And one example that I would like to share on using game theory, I think, is making calculative or educated decision. For example, when we face uh, every day we will face with many arrays of decision. So some may be inconsequential. Maybe you can just ignore it. It doesn't matter the consequences. Like where you decide to eat or where you decide to sleep and where you decide to go outside or stay inside, doesn't matter much, for example. But other could be life changing, for example, deciding to change your supervisor or not, or because you are not very well with your supervisor or something, or to decide whether to accept a scholarship or not, for example, just for example. And most people will tend to avoid it or delay it. So this actually sometimes works, but sometimes not so much. And because of that, you have to, make a decision more or less. So what I'm sharing here actually is something that maybe you are forced to have an ultimatum, maybe having unavoidable conflicts, or maybe indecisive. So in a way, you can actually play around with this on your own. So let me give an example scenario. Maybe you are required to join uh, any of the colloquial activity as asked by your supervisor. And for example, presenting a work in progress, kind of like a paper presentation, a poster, or 3-minute thesis, for example, right? So which one you should choose? And let's say uh, you are more interested in 3-minute thesis because you are not progressing well. You don't have any material to make a poster, and you don't really have anything to write as a paper. So you're just interested in 3MT, meaning that you're trying to present what you have, what your idea so far. But your supervisor may be much more interested in work in progress. So how you can actually, make the situation actually viable for both of you. So these are what we call variable sum game, meaning that when you sum up all this information, it will not lead to zero. So a zero sum game actually when you have a different uh, standing. Let's say your supervisor want you to go, you don't want to go. So yeah, that's a zero sum game. But this one is very variable sum game, meaning that if let's say you cannot come to an agreement, you at least have some kind of agreement in certain situation. So let's say you can see from the first column here, you don't prefer having work in progress, but your supervisor very prefer to have a work in progress. So it's 1 to 3. So again, you're less preferred to have poster, but still you can do it maybe if for example force, but if supervisor still okay or accept it because it's more or less still presenting overall your result as well. But this one is much more or less preferable to your supervisor, and of course doing nothing are not preferable in any way, right? And of course sometimes you are preferred as well, you prefer to do it as well. So yeah, just example here. Anyway, so based on this outline of preference from your supervisor and your preference, you can see that there are some cases where these are the worst possible decision that you can make, meaning you're doing nothing. And the one that the best you can do actually is make a poster, and uh maybe the least that you want, both of you want actually, is to you joining as a work in progress, and your supervisor just expecting 3-minute thesis, because your supervisor doesn't want 3-minute thesis. He or she want the work in progress, for example. So yeah, so it's acceptable, but less preferred. Yeah, so this may works as well, unless you can actually find a 3 by 3 here. I don't think so. Yeah, so these are just example. Yeah, so how you actually assign this value actually is depending on how you prefer in this situation. Meaning that if you prefer this compared to your supervisor, then you should have value that higher than that supervisor. Example like this one, you prefer to have 3-minute thesis, but your supervisor doesn't prefer, so you can just put 3-2 or 2-1, doesn't matter. It's similar. It just I'm trying to use this as an example to show a preference. Can be just 0-1, 1-0, 1-0, 1-1, doesn't matter. So these are one interesting take of using game theory. Basically, game theory actually being used for economics, psychology, and biology even, to make decision making under risk. And of course, you have to consider all the possible options. These are just very simple one. Maybe the decision can be hundreds and thousands even, and even being used for, for nation negotiation and even economics development in the very critical business process. So I would like to share what me and my professor also have done to actually leads to an unexpected endeavor when you're doing your research, and some experience actually shape your research quite interesting in an interesting way. For example, when I said before, when I done my research, that we are more focusing on, trying to expertise, determining the expertise of an skillful player that mitigate gain space. For example, in chess alone, when making a move, an AI have to consider 10 to the power of 75 uh, move at 1 second. So they have to consider very massive number of search space, and by using skill, we can reduce it and finally determine the best one among this one. So that's more or less the basic work we done, and because of that, we lead to development of logistic progress model, meaning that we use the game progress to understand the experience of certain tasks. For example, like when we put a time pressure, maybe the task will be much more gamified or maybe interesting in a way. And this leads to very interesting law of motion in mind, because of because of the time pressure just now, right? We kind of reduce the time, and then because of that, the measure of the game progress become from velocity to acceleration. So because of that, we think that it has some kind of connection to classical physics, and we adopt classical physics analogy to the game experience. And this lead to a law of motion in mind, which actually we don't plan in a way. And quite interesting, we develop this more and more and lead to a law of conservation, meaning that when energy and momentum are conserved over time based on the analogy of classical physics just now, we can actually describe engagement and addiction in games. And it's all actually a publication, recent publication we done. And currently we are focusing on comfort in mind and empathetic entertainment, meaning that we try to understand what is the comfortable situation when we are faced with certain experience, and how actually we when we enjoying an entertainment, how can we be more empathetic towards other players when in the multiplayer game, for example. So basically, you can see that sometimes you didn't plan to do this, but actually it leads you to it, and actually how you actually uh, take this as a good or uh, a good projection for your research as well is that you try to be vigilant and see other opportunities that open up, and I'll share this later why this is important. So basically, one of the first part you need to consider when doing your research actually is finding what work best for you. For example, what are the time or work management that you are good at? For example, are you a daytime work, or maybe you're a night owl, or maybe you are irregular. I mean, sometimes you work in day, sometimes you work in night, sometimes you just work whenever you have time. So any of this doesn't matter as long as you can actually do it as good or as efficient as possible. Because if you look back, right, sometimes you can see that how much actually time you spend for research, uh, uh specifically for research. Let's say in my own experience, I could say that I spend more or less 1 to 2 hours at most to do my research work. And of course, it doesn't mean I spend the whole 2 hours at one time. It can be just 10 minutes at some point, and some maybe half an hour, and sometimes maybe just 5 minutes. It depends. But of course, how do you divide it, and of course, how you actually, use it efficiently and effectively. So, for example, when you do a certain task, you do it uh, as effective as possible, and as in the best possible state as possible. So let's say you are able to do it in the afternoon time because you are not being disturbed by your family, or maybe you don't have to go out and eat or something, right? So take that time to work as best as possible and as much as possible. And I know because when working, especially when we as a computer science student or researcher, right, we tend to distracted by other things. For example, like social media, like internet, like news, and entertainment and so on. But if let's say we put some time, specific time for it, then actually we can actually work very efficiently. And this actually have largely worked for me. Because when people ask me, where do you prefer, in office work or housework, or doing work at home and so on? To me, I prefer to work at home because it's easier for me to eat and so on, right? And another one is actually I prefer the distraction because I don't want to be too engrossed doing something, and because of that, I don't really do anything. Yeah, something like that. But other people may have different opinion. And some of the application that can help you in this context is actually, for example, like Trello, Monday.com, Google Docs, and Slacks. This actually some of the time or work management that you can done. Maybe try to do kind of like a sticky note, not a sticky note, kind of like a notes that you can actually make a notification for it, maybe some kind of deadline or due date. And because of that, you will receive this notification from your phone, from your computers, and so on, because you already put that uh, into this particular application. And this actually help you to trace back all your work, and these are actually relevant. I know some students, maybe they're lazy to do this because they are not much to do unless other than doing their research. But of course, going further, maybe when you have you have family and you have more responsibility, then this actually become much more relevant to you. And then of course paper writing itself. Some paper writing maybe will be covered later by Dr. Lai and Dr. Toke later on, much in detail. But in general, I think there are several you know software that can actually help you to be much more effective. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, Clockify also fine as well. I forgot the name, that's why I didn't include it. Anyway, the paper writing actually is quite interesting because the one that I'm familiar with is Grammarly and Quillbot. Grammarly is good for checking your grammar, and Quillbot is good for paraphrasing. But I didn't know that you can actually generate a whole article and even a whole sentence, and sometimes I'm not sure the whole structure of the paper. I'm not sure, but these are some of the software that actually at your disposal. Some maybe have to pay, some may be free to use, some for some kind of demo and so on. And actually it works. Actually, you don't have to uh use it extensively. You can use it to actually generate certain point or certain content that you're interested on, and this actually help actually in terms of paper writing. And then the second part is actually the writing style. Some people are much more analytic, some may be argumentative, meaning that in terms of analytic, you are much more neutral and objective. So you try to explore and evaluate from logical information. But some maybe are much more on taking one side of the issue and building logical persuasion. And this is important because if you're trying to write analytical paper, you have to avoid doing argumentative, because the mixture of two is not a good mixture in terms of writing. So if you're trying to make an argument, do an argument uh, uh, wholly actually, so that you can actually highlight the issue that you're interested on and trying to build a logical persuasion towards it. But if you're taking a neutral and objective question, for example, then suddenly you're just taking one side instead of neutral, then it become weird and suddenly become something that going to be bad for your research review and your viva later on. And then of course your own research style. For example, me myself, I would say I'm more on compare and contrast, because I would like to you know find certain stand and then see certain properties or extract certain properties and compare and contrast, meaning finding the advantage and disadvantages, and maybe try to add my own insight from it. Other maybe they're much more interested in extract or synthesize, meaning that they select a specific content from multiple literatures and synthesize it. And this actually also works. And sometimes I also experimented on this, and it's much more difficult and actually quite useful if you're writing, review paper or survey papers. And another one is much more social based research, but of course, qualitative research, but of course, it's still applicable to quantitative research as well. So you construct a hypothesis using collection or analysis of data, meaning you don't have any stand and so on. You don't have any idea about your hypothesis. You don't have your own hypothesis. You're just collecting data from certain part and certain literatures, and you form or construct hypothesis from that. So you don't have a specific stand or objective stand that you want to take. And finally, maybe in anything, there are challenges and well-being that you need to consider. Of course, most people will have this situation. I also have this kind of situation last time during my research study. And even now, I still have that. But still, we may face something like fail to perform, overwhelming frustration, feel like quitting. And of course, before we do anything that we will regret later, maybe we should keep calm. Maybe try to take a break, move away from your computer or from your work for time being, maybe spending with your family, with your friend, and maybe just, enjoying entertainment and so on. And then, of course, when you feel like quitting, you can keep trying. Not ju- not everything today, but sometimes other times, because uh, it work when you being optimistic. There always another alternative or ways to actually address certain challenging situation. These are just a demonstration for a game that I recently played, so quite interesting. So sometimes you have to take initiative, because when you fail to do something, maybe there are some other opportunities that you can find, and maybe being proactive on it actually can help. You cannot just quit because you find it difficult to do. Maybe you're just not exploring enough. You have to be proactive and find other opportunities. And of course, trying to find perspective. Try to look for fresh perspective, maybe asking other people opinion, especially the one that are not coming from your field as well. This actually very useful. For example, when I'm out of perspective, I always ask my wife, because she always has some perspective that I always overlook. Yeah, so that's why sometimes you have to ask other people opinion, another view, or another ways of looking into certain things. Maybe let's say one of it I can ask my wife, another maybe asking my father, and maybe asking my brother. Yeah, and even maybe sometimes you look something too long, maybe, so you feel like you don't know what you're doing wrong. So it actually you can actually sometimes take a break and maybe let it marinate for a few days. It worked for me, I think, because when you look into something too much, you feel that everything is correct, but after you look back for a few days later, you will find that, oh, this is actually wrong, or maybe you're writing it wrong. You doesn't understand it very well. This is actually relevant, especially when you're in your early or later stage of your career later on. Example, if you're doing academic research, right? Uh, you're applying for grant and so on, right? This is something that happen when you write a grant, for example. I can see that the one that I write uh, last few years ago compared to the one I write now is actually very different. And this is actually quite interesting because uh, your mind always evolving, and actually when you have enough sleep, you actually uh, you know uh, build the connection that actually see what you need to see from the perspective of others. That's why sometimes uh, you need to take a break and keep calm, especially in situation like writing a difficult review, or review, or maybe thesis, and so on, or papers. Another maybe let's say uh, what I forgot. Yeah, more or less. Thank you. uh, anyway, but of course, we need to actually, reevaluate every time we do something. That's a very interesting point. And when I write a grant, I think the first time when you wrote it, you feel like it's already correct and so on. But later on, you will see that you actually have some mistake and so on. And I would implore that when you dealing with something like this, you need to do it uh, as early as possible. Don't take too long, or don't do it, too last minute, I think. Yeah, because when you do it last minute, you tend to make some mistake that you uh what we call careless mistake. Yeah, careless mistake, because you tend to do this kind of mistake without noticing it. So in summary, when you matching research to gaming just now, the important part is understanding the rule. Actually, how actually you do something, and when you have the better understanding of something, the process becomes smoother, and the player or the researcher are becoming much more motivated, and the process that the game that you play become much more interesting because you actually understand something that you do. And then when you master it, the process become in depth. You're much more skillful in term of doing certain processes in the game, and this actually is similar to research as well. And you are much more engaged to what you're currently doing. For example, like currently I'm doing in gaming research, right? Because of uh, I like game at the same time I like doing research. So by marrying this, actually, we are being much more engaged in terms of finding new areas, finding new ideas, and so on. And because of that, we can actually see the outcome are able to be reached, and it's becoming worthwhile. We can feel that it's a sense of achievement when you actually reach something, and everything that we done will be very memorable. So in more or less aspect, by having how, what, and why better, then we can actually game the research process. So to end my workshop today, most people see what is and never see what can be. So yeah, basically we always doesn't know our future, but uh, if we can see it, then we actually better comprehension of what we actually doing now. So uh, it's always good to have a optimistic and good target for yourself and your future. So that's all from me. Thank you very much. And any question I welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akmal. So we are now open for question. Is there any question from our participants today?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Right. So we have one question from Mullah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this his question is like this. In most cases under computer science, research questions are used more often to communicate results. Where do research questions belong in your results communication methods? Because just now you mentioned about variables, hypotheses, and arguments.
Yeah. Uh, let me hear something like here, right? Well, uh, based on the one that the building block just now, right? I believe that research question may be more or less something to do with research aim and objective part, meaning the conceptual definition and operational definition. Meaning that when you do your research question, you need to cover both conceptual and operational, not just either side. Because conceptual is something that you need to prove, right? Then because of that, you need certain operational part of it to actually how you can prove it, not just the what, the how as well. So yeah, that's more or less my answer.
Okay.
I hope this answer the question.
Yeah, Mullah, did Dr. Akmal answer your question? Okay, yes, all right.
All right.
Thank you, Mullah, for the question. Any question from the floor?
Yeah, you're welcome lah. Yeah, sure, Dr. Aman. I will share with everyone. I think, yeah. Later I will give to Dr. Gan. Yeah.
Okay. Think the session is being recorded as well.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any more question? You may turn on your microphone as well if you would like to ask the question directly. I mean, address the question to Dr. Akmal directly. All right. I think everyone is quite happy with your presentation, Dr. Akmal. It's
Thank you.
very clear, and I hope everyone is really benefited from your workshop this morning.
Thank
It's
you.
very informative. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're
So
welcome.
with that, we will move on for a short break. Once again, Dr. Akmal, thank you for the workshop. And then thanks everyone for your participation in this session. So we'll now proceed with a short break before the next session. The next session will start at 11. So participants, please return by 11 a.m. and I'll see you later. So meanwhile, we have CSPC 2021 Padlet, which allowed our participants, students, researchers, lecturers to interact in the Padlet. We will share with you the link momentarily. So you may introduce yourself and show a picture from where you are right now, because I know some of us are from the other part of the world, some in Africa, some in China, and etc. All right. So I will see you again later. So have a good break. Thank you again, Dr. Akmal. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, the moderator, and also thank you everyone for listening. Appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you again in the future. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, definitely. All
Yeah.
right. See you.